So welcome everyone. We're here together to discuss a kind of controversial topic, a discussion that is happening currently around the compatibility between the analyzers and the race backend or the vulnerability management system. And the reason why I raised the concern is not from the technical aspect, but more about what is the engineering vision on, to achieve the product goal. And what caught my attention in this discussion is a sentence that said that that we have two different products, the analyzers on one side and the vulnerability management system on another side, and that these two products can be utilized by the end users individually. And I think that why this is technically true, because currently we release the tools as Docker images that can be used independently. They have never been part of the product goal to sell them and to release them as standalone products. The only reason why they exist is to provide this information into the GitLab Race application, because we want to provide users a single application to achieve all DevOps workflow, DevSecOps workflow. So maybe part of the misunderstanding around that is also the fact that we are producing intermediary reports. And this is just coming from the historical approach with no database backend for supporting that information, but just giving this information directly to the front end via those JSON reports. But we could have been using an API endpoint instead and never produce this intermediary result. So this is something that maybe is changing, and this is why, as you raised earlier, Thiago, we might have needed some discussion with the product team, but so far it has never been part of the intent to release this tool as independent products. And as I said, one of the good reasons for that is that initially most of those analyzers are coming from open source software, and the only work that we are doing on top of them is the integration part, meaning making sure they're running within our CI job environment and converting that output into a normalized structure and normalized set of data so that it can be ingested in a common fashion into the Race backend and provide a seamless interface for the users. So this is the very main aspect. So is there any diverging opinion on that, or any other ideas or news that might change this vision from the engineering?
So we've got 3 engineering managers from analyzer groups here. In threat insights, I tend to see more around for the vulnerability management system, but even so, I haven't heard or read anything about providing analyzers as standalone products. Do any of you have any of you?
No, I have not. And I actually wrote a blog post when I first got to GitLab 2 years ago, and they said you specifically can't have customers run it as an independent analyzer because it violates a license agreement, because you can theoretically, technically run an analyzer without a license. But you need an EE license. So they're really designed to work together. But I don't know if that's more of a semantic thing. Like I do think of our analyzer as essentially an independent tool. Like there should not be a lot of back and forth with threat insights. Like the idea would be that there's good contracts defined between threat insights and the analyzer. And whether it's my team or whether it's, I don't know, SonarQube or IBM or like some other, like they should be in the same position that my team is in terms of integrating. Now, the benefit that my team has is I can call up Thiago and be like, hey, can you add this thing? And we can get that in there a little faster. But I don't, conceptually, I think those external vendors should be able to integrate just as easily as the DAS team or the SAS team or one of the other teams.
Any comments, Thomas?
What I think this thread is coming from is from this thread, and I think specifically this note I think Mehmet introduced this idea, and we're accepting the premise regardless, but licensing and putting licensing aside, yes, it's technically possible to run them independently, but it is against but it's not what we're going to build. And so I think we can set that aside, but there's some education about what we are building contractually, what people can do that probably needs to occur. So I think we can put that aside for purposes of this conversation.
Yeah, piggybacking on a bit on what Seth was saying in terms of, sorry, Lindsay, any comments? No. On what Seth was saying about setting direction, my feeling since we started having to work with the schemas is that some groups have done more than others in that area. I know that Cam and Fabian, they take a special interest to it. So whenever there are discussions about schemas, they jump in and they fully engaged. But there hasn't been a specific group ownership of that, and resulted in some of the things that we want to do in that area not being prioritized or looked after as much as we wanted in the technical side. So my interest in this part of the goals of the parent epic to this issue. This issue came from a parent epic where it says that threatening sites should be the owner of those analyzer schemas, because if every analyzer is contributing with reports, with findings to the vulnerability management system, threatening sites is the group that touches all of the other groups, right? And by definition, we should have more visibility into what's happening across all the analyzers. It does not mean that threatening sites is in an ivory tower making decisions about what goes and what doesn't go in the analyzer, but it does mean that we'll take a much stronger position into pushing and making things forward. We haven't done this type of work before, so the playing rules are not quite there yet, particularly around deprecation notices to users, how much influence we can exert on groups. So if we do something, deprecate a field and say that you need to remove it, we have to communicate this to all the analyzer groups and third parties. And how long do we give them? And what happens when they don't do or don't have time to do? Do we break their integration? So all these things are coming up now. And this particular issue is sort of the crux of that, because it's defining how do we version these schemas and what are the ground rules here? Are we allowed to break them whenever we want them? Or do we introduce how many versions of backwards compatibility do we keep? So I got no questions. I think this issue is not due for executing for a while. We're obviously not going to do any breaking changes for 14.0. It's around the corner. I do want to have some direction before 15.0. If we're going to make any changes of how we operate there, I'd love to get that into 15.0. So that's what I'd like to get out of this.
I think it really makes a lot of sense to have threat inside owning the schemas. And this is where I think that the direction that this proposal is taking is probably to give you that ownership. But the creation of an additional schema, I mean, what really I'm trying to highlight is the fact that the proposal is coming to a situation where we would have a schema for the analyzers because they can be used independently from the vulnerability management system, and then a schema for ingesting data into the vulnerability management system. And to me, this is definitely not useful, because unless we want to release this tool independently, but there will be a duplication of purpose, because the purpose of the schemas of the analyzers is to make sure they can be ingested into the Rails backend. It just happened that by the time we grew and we transitioned the vulnerability management system into a separate group, I think we have not correctly handed over that historical knowledge. And since we don't have tons of collaboration between those groups, it's super difficult to get this understanding about what has been done in the past in the analyzers and what is our goal. But again, we just want to have this information into the Rails backend. And this is where I think there should just be one schema to rule them all. So regarding the fact that we are having difficulties to work on these topics, I totally agree. I came with some proposals that I was not able to propose to suggest into the staff meeting because we're running out of time and it maybe needs some more discussion. But Nicole is trying to push for those things too, like having some dedicated people in your team, Thiago, so that they are only focusing on those shared topics. And those people would get knowledge from each group, because I think this is mandatory. This is another key aspect of the discussion there, is that there is a strong opinion that the data, the schema format has to be driven by VMS because it's serving the VMS. And yes, this is true, but the VMS is also living because of the data that the security scanners provided. So there is a very tight coupling that I don't see how we can get around. I mean, it's something that has always to be done in collaboration between these two main areas. And having people that have knowledge about both sides, I think is the best solution for this.
So I just had a clarifying question. When you're talking about one schema, are you talking about eliminating, right now we've got like a DAST, a SAST, a fuzzing, but they technically kind of come from a schema just with addition. Like, I don't know if you're talking about like one that would eliminate those distinctions.
I think Olivier is talking about the specific proposal from Mehmet, because he said there are two sets of schema. One that serves integration with VMS, and that if you as an analyzer, whether third party or GitLab, want GitLab to ingest, you need to comply with that schema. And then there's a separate set of schema, and each analyzer is free to do their own. And that's what I understood from the little that I read. I haven't read the full thing, but it sounds like what Mehmet was trying to do there is create a framework where, hey, VMS can keep doing its features and creating new things and making that available as a service to analyzers, and they can join in into new features, at least the non-mandatory ones, and at the same time allow analyzers to do their own thing. But I'm a little bit with Olivier on this one, that I don't, if we don't have an intent of releasing analyzers as standalone products, I don't know how much value there is into using a framework like this. Does that make sense, Seth?
A framework like having the two schemas,
having this dual view of, yeah,
right. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like, when I think about what GitLab is, the tighter we couple these things, the more value there is for a customer, because it's like a seamless experience of like, hey, I ran this analyzer, it shows up in my dashboard, and I can, I would love to be able to say on the vulnerability dashboard, change my configuration, and that flows right back into my schema, into my analyzer, and then I rerun it. Like, tight coupling actually creates more value for our customers. If the DAS analyzer or CA analyzer is no different than, an IBM one or whatever, it's like, well, where's the integration that I'm getting a lot of value from GitLab? So, I think the closer we can work together, I think the more value we can create. We just need to create a good separation so that we're efficient and everyone can move forward independently without stepping on each other's toes.
I like that.
How do you, sorry. How do you do a tight coupling without putting each of us on a treadmill trying to keep up with each other and therefore not able to move on our own independent roadmaps?
I think that's the crux of that design issue there. It's figure out, there's always going to be a treadmill. I think we're trying to agree how fast the treadmill is going to be moving. You know, do we give you 3 months to abide to a new version? Do I give you 6 months? Do I give you a year?
Can we? Because another really important aspect is that we don't have full control about the data we're producing. Maybe if we have an internal tool, internally developed tool, we can adapt, but sometimes we're relying on an external tool that might not produce that information. So, but for the main usage, I'd say, of a management system, it should be okay.
On what Seth was saying about the tight coupling, just to put it some color to that example, we've been coming across in I've got a bit of visibility into container security and to threat insights, and now that we're doing a bit of DAST is doing, which is to scan things that are live and might not be associated with a branch or project specifically. Basically, you can point that scanner to anywhere, and we can do that with we're going to be able to do that very soon with container live scanning, which means if you have containers running vulnerable images, you're going to have a bunch of findings that are duplicate not only across the containers, instance containers themselves, but also with the results from an image scanning, but maybe also from the dependency scanning, but also maybe from some static analysis, right? So being able to have a common denominator across all that you can say, hey, these are actually all one and the same. If you fix this one here, all these will be fixed. I think it's very valuable for customers.
Going back to our main issue, which is about how we can move forward without either impacting drastically the roadmap of the analyzers team, because basically this is a problem I can see today. Anytime you want to move forward on one of those items, you are missing some of the knowledge from those specific groups. And so you either need to spend a huge amount of time learning that, which might be duplicating efforts, or having the one person of each of this team joining the effort so that you can move forward, and you repeat that anytime you're working on such an issue. And it doesn't work because we don't have that time. So we just try to discuss the time we can, but it's not an efficient process. And since defining a given set of people to work on that is super hard to achieve right now due to the amount of people that we have and the hiring budget we have, I think that if we want to move forward for the next 6 months or so before we can hire more people, the working group sounds to me to be the very best approach to do that. Having a working group that will focus on those main items about integration, working on the schema, the versioning, because there is a tight coupling by nature, but we can probably come up with a framework that will give each of this team part of the flexibility they need. The first step you made in that direction to me is the generic fields, that the extra field, sorry, I don't recall the exact name, but
details.
The detail, thank you. So it allows, if we can move toward that direction, it will allow, just by having the same schema, but having each analyzer teams to keep building specific features that might be enabled in the Rails backend by the presence of those additional detailed properties. So maybe what we just need is spending some time in the next few months giving a last effort to achieve that vision, to give us this framework, and then we will get more efficiency, let's say, in the day-to-day work and the regular addition that we can add in each team or on your side.
So would the main goal of the working group would be to come up with a framework, or would it be to resolve this versioning issue that's at the main
I think it's part
crux.
of that. When I say the framework, I'd say that setting up the whole environment and workflow that allows the vulnerability management system to ingest any kind of vulnerability information, but not by setting that as an independent path from our analyzers. Again, we are all ingesting that information into the race backend via the same entry point, which today is this report, JSON report. But if tomorrow you have an API, we could drop our temporary reports and use the API. And it doesn't make sense to me to maintain multiple entry points. We should just, as Seth says, we should all be like IBM or any third parties. We provide vulnerability data information into the very same system. And whatever the brand name we put on those analyzers, they should have the exact same capabilities. So to me, the working group should define that, how we version things, how we can define the support range between the raised version and the different tool, either it's GitLab Analyzer or third parties. What is the deprecation path, the notification delays, and things like that. Really defining how we can work on a sustainable way for the long term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's when you put it like that, it's funny because we could end up Trojan horsing the direction from threat insights. If we do a good job on the GraphQL API, on the mutation to insert vulnerabilities via an API, and analyzers starting using that, then we'll just be playing by the existing rules for GraphQL deprecation. They're already in place, right? And then might come a point where we'll go, well, these JSON schemas are not being used by anyone else. Do we still need them? But I'm not opposed to the idea of a working group to get us past that. I don't think we'll be in a position a year from now where we exclusively using an API for ingestion. I think those schemas will be here for longer than that. Maybe not longer than 2 years, but certainly longer than a year. Does anyone have a different gut feeling about that?
No, I just hadn't heard this idea of like maybe just moving to the API or this getting rid of the schemas. Is that in this issue, or this is just something Olivier was?
I think
about?
Olivier just had the epiphany there. He said tomorrow. It might actually be next week. There's a there's a draft MR ready for a new service to ingest vulnerabilities via the API. The MR is just missing the GraphQL operation. I think that's the issue that Lindsay just pasted. Thank you.
I'm going to be the annoying person in the room, or the virtual room, for a moment. And this is almost certainly because I came in late. We're solutioning right now. What are we trying to achieve with this conversation?
The initial concern was our understanding within the engineering about the product goal, what we are trying to build, what is our vision. And this was right by the few first sentences that I mentioned that were said in that discussion in the issue, where analyzers and vulnerability management system were two different products, and that the solution, the proposal that we're starting to be, the technical solution that we're starting to be discussed in that issue, we're assuming that there are different products. We went a bit further in the discussion, but this was the originating point.
So, and what I would also add is kind of what we're trying to solve is how do we make sure the analyzer groups can work as efficiently as they can, and threat insights can work as efficiently as we can, and we have clear understanding as to how we work together.
On that, one thing that I took away from this, or two things. One is that no, we're very unlikely to release these things independently. So that premise is probably incorrect. Two, at least Olivier doesn't oppose threat insights owning that. However, the main concern continues to be what Cameron has raised a couple of weeks ago, which can the analyzers team still do their job, still deliver their features if threats insights that is the honor. And that doesn't even mean just because threat insights doesn't want it or it's because threat insights has a different vision. It's also resource wise, right? Does threat insights have the people power to respond to inquiries in a timely manner, to execute them, or to review proposals to enable all the teams to like everybody can contribute, right? But if Threat Insights is the owner, at least Threat Insights will need to validate that against the roadmap, against what's coming up. And if you're going to allow the other analyzer groups to go, go in, we'll need to have people to make sure that the plan, the proposal is right. So
yeah, and I think
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, one of the things that we're certainly feeling on the DAS side is Threat Insights is very common denominator, right? It's like, let's get all these fields that work for each of these analyzers. Where our roadmap is going on DAS is inherently a bit of a different tool. And then where we're going is not very common denominator with the other analyzers. And so if Threat Insights is just managing the common denominator, that may hamper our roadmap on the DAS side, because it's like, hey, there's no place to put this data. There's no way to interact with this data on the Rails monolith. Where are we in terms of how can we build that out if we're trying to get everything to line up across the groups?
It's definitely a bit harder, but being in this situation a bit with the dependency scanning, because we are building the dependency list maybe later as a software bill of material. So based on the same initial set of data, we are building something else. But I think this is really what the generic schema had as an intent, and which is great about that is vulnerability management category has to define the minimum set of information they require to provide the management of the vulnerability, whatever the kind. So and this is how we built, and this is maybe where I think we need to discuss more with Threat Insights, because this was the initial intent, what we call the common report, which is now called the security report. I don't recall what's called in the schemas, but this is exactly that. What is the common denominator between all the different types of vulnerabilities? So you can see that we have multiple schemas, but under the hood, it's like we just have one schema that said this is how a vulnerability should look like. But if this is a DAST vulnerability, it has its extra requirements. If this is a dependency scanning one, it has its extra requirements. But this is how we did it so far, but we can do it differently. We could just have one schema that say what a vulnerability is, and then everything additional is not strongly type based on the type of analyzer or report type, but it could be just specific to some specific attributes that enable features, and that might be also a path to improve with more flexibility. But this is what I think it would be great to have a working group, because we could have people from each team building this system with Threat Insight by sharing this common vision. If we cannot have a dedicated set of people, which we probably can't.
We're running out of time, so to address that, I think the working group can be a good idea to try and at least give the initial direction, give that boost of momentum that you need, because it would allocate people to the problem. The second thing that I want to say is that we might be over concerned with this for two reasons. One, because of the API evolution. Maybe it won't be such a problem because analyzers will choose to use that. And the second point is that the schema is fairly stable at the moment, right? So that common denominator, I think, already exists, apart from a few fields that we want to remove and haven't done so or rename. It's pretty much understood. It's right. The question is, how do we build on top of that? And with that, we've got 5 minutes. And where do we go from here? What do we want to do next? Do we want to let that issue evolve naturally for a week or so? Or do we want to start thinking of a working group?
So I've been trying to stay quiet, and I'm going to fail miserably. But I'll say, first and foremost, we should only do a working group if we feel that is absolutely the last choice, because it's a very heavy-handed process. Second, this exact issue has been solved by many companies several times over, and I can't help but think that we can glean information from how other security companies have solved for this. I know for a fact that there are generic APIs out there so that anybody can pump anything into a reporting structure. And if you want examples, I'm happy to chat with you offline about those. So my personal preference, and I will defer it to everybody here, but my personal preference would be that there is a generic API, and then there is unique, right? So there's the common denominator type stuff that we've already been talking about, and then there are unique fields, you know, whether we call it details or what have you. I think that will largely satisfy, and also keep in mind, right now we have a set amount of analyzers. I promise you, as we move forward, there will be more and more analyzers added. So we absolutely need to be future-proofing this and thinking about this in a very generic way about how we can pump this information into the reporting structure. And with that, I'll stop. And apologies. Like I said, I was trying to stay quiet. And I'm still failing. But on top of all this, whatever we decide, we still have to bounce off product and make sure that they're okay with the direction that we go. I look at the issue and I see that it is a novella, which also has me extremely worried, because that means that there's a lot of unorchestrated thought in this. I almost wonder if it would be better to scrap it and start a new issue or start something clean. But again, I will, whatever the group here decides, I'm good with.
I think part of the length is back to Thomas's question, is like, what are we solving? This issue is solving. How do we work together? How do we do the schemas? You know, what is the product direction? We're trying to solve all of those. And I think we may want to just order those. It's like, let's figure out what the product direction is. Are these separate products? Are they ever going to be released independently? Can customers run that? And that's an MR in our product handbook. Answer that question. Then from a technical perspective, we can figure out, okay, how do we solve it that way? But I think everyone's just batting around all these problems at the same time.
I have a point of view that I came with that I haven't shared in this meeting. I am happy to add it to the novella if that is useful, but I have a point of view on all of this. If you want to hear it now,
maybe
live.
share it now. It's since
okay.
that we're recording.
All right, fabulous. Now it's durable. All right, from my point of view, there are two major sources of volatility that I have to cope with. One is how we report this information. While it may be somewhat stable now, it has been volatile, and the evidence of that is we're on version 14 after 8 or 9 months. And I know that past performance is not a guarantee of future performance as well. The other source of volatility is what these analyzers can detect themselves. So, and that's a data problem. So what we can detect, what rules we need to embed into the product is going to determine the release cadence of any analyzer that I have. And each of these are released and they're released independently. So The way that we go to market today optimizes for adoption over stability. And by that, I mean, we pin to major. We overwrite version 2 for everything that we do for every single analyzer that we release. That is a choice. And that is something that is an option that I can throw out on that is a go-to-market strategy that can be changed. The 3 items that I've prepared was from a point of view is as far as what the schema is or how I report it, I really don't need to own it and will adopt whatever format comes out of it. The thing that I cannot absorb is to be on a very frequent treadmill trying to keep up with a report format. If that happens, that makes an extremely hard problem area even harder, and we're struggling with too much work in progress to date, and that just adds to it. The second item that I have is that if the schema versions supported by are declared in Rails as far, and we're doing a hard validation, whatever is reported within this, whatever is accepted by the Rails platform needs to be durable. And I would argue it needs to be durable on a major GitLab major to major cadence. So you can add to it, and then we can do a hard deprecation on 15, 16, 17, and what have you. And then that way you can move forward and you can retire, and we can catch up when we can over the course of the year. And that makes the treadmill a lot less fast. And the third item that I have is we're getting in our own way with how we go to market. We can solve a lot of this by independently pinning to minor, which brings into focus the decay problem, in that the efficacy of each individual analyzer will decay at the rate at which it is updated. And so because rules are injected at build time, not at runtime, and we don't have a way to solve for that today. So that would be a major, major change if we needed to flip that. And that's going to take a lot of effort and something we're not prepared to accept at the moment. That was the point of view that I had. I don't have solutions, but I do have constraints that I would like to see put into it. And hopefully that helps, or we'll see.
It does help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think the first 2 are being concerned, because this is already part of the public API. The ingestion system is what we provide to our customers, third parties, or even and us. And this is part of everything that we put into the Rails application has to follow the usual support range that we want, which is the last 3 majors or something like that. And so definitely, if the vulnerability management system needs to make some changes that is impacting us, and we have to update to stay compatible with the upcoming version of GitLab, this definitely is a breaking change that happens into a major release or a special announcement that we have to make to anybody, us included. So definitely will give us enough time to adapt if needed.
It does to a degree. It solves the SaaS, the .com solution. It does not satisfy the long-running instances of old versions of GitLab and self-managed.
Which we support for 2 major versions.
Yeah, so 3 years. Yeah. And so it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge for us, definitely.
So I'm conscious of time and of people watching this later on. I would like to propose at this point that we take it offline to make whoever's watching this not so miserable.
but we're a delight.
I know.
So what are the actions that we're taking out of this then?
I really like the suggestion from Tess about making sure we are highlighting the engineering vision based on the product goals in somewhere in the handbook. Like, analyzers are not a standalone product. Their only reason of living is to provide that information to the Rails backend so that it's clear, and maybe educate all the team members to make sure that this is known as a fact when they are thinking about engineering our systems. And I think this was my main concern when raising the point in the staff meeting. So I think this is agreed between us. So I will reach out to the product team, create a merge request, maybe, and ping the product team to validate that with them. And I think this is a first problem solved. And we can keep working for the other topics on a spread issue.
Second action point, if I may ask, Thomas, that you summarize your 3 points in that issue to add to the novella. And third, but not least, Todd, since you asked about actions, is I've made Mehmet the DRI for this, and he does not have capacity. So I need to find him the capacity, or I need to find a new DRI that has the capacity. So I'll take that.
Okay, great. Like I said, I anytime we have meetings like this, I absolutely want to have actions that are coming out of them. Otherwise, all we did is talk to each other, right? So, which is good, but
delightful.
Not quite enough. Yeah,
as Thomas would put it.
Right,
anything in this that would stop it from being a public video? We talked a little bit about strategy, but I don't think there's big secrets there. Cool. Who's got this? Is it you, Olivier? Who started the recording?
It's a cloud.
Is it cloud one? All right. I'm happy to do it. I'm at the start of my day. I can pick that up.
Whoever organized the meeting, it'll show up in their Zoom account.
Yeah, it's my email. I will send that to you, Thiago. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending and the great discussion.
Thank you for organizing.
Good end of your day.
Have a good evening,
Bye-bye.
everyone.